Here we go. Welcome to the Cabinet Maker Profit System podcast, just for woodshop owners like cabinet makers, architecture millworkers, and closet companies. The owners that are interested in the business of the woodshop business. If you want to work smarter, not just harder, you're in the right place. My name's Dominic Rubino, and I'll be your host. Today's guest is Diane Shattuck, and today we're going to talk about how to hire the right finisher. Diane's got incredible experience in woodshop finishing. But first, what's this podcast all about? Well, I show contractors how to get back in control of their construction business, even if they don't know where to start. The truth is, you don't need a lot of extra time or a business degree to build a profitable and solid woodworking business. You just need simple systems that give you quiet confidence. You see, for too long, our industry's been keeping secrets, and I'm here to put an end to that. On this show, you're going to learn how to use simple systems in 3 different places. Number 1, in the office. Number 2, on a job site. And number 3, in their shop. Now, more important than that, I also show people the secrets of business success, how to work smarter, not just harder, and to have a mindset of growth. So if you're a business owner who's curious to find ways to run your shop profitably, to have more time off, do the things you love, build a team you can rely on, and grow a company that, one day you can decide to sell or pass on to somebody else, or heck, just live off the cash flow, you're in the right place. Now, I'm a business owner. I'm also a business coach. The only people I work with are in the construction and contracting industry, business owners who want to get their business to the next level. And I host this podcast because one day I want to be your business coach. As a matter of fact, I have a team of business coaches that I have personally hand-selected. I have very high expectations for the people that join my team, and I'm proud of every single one of them. As you listen to this podcast, ask yourself if you think me and my team might be the right tool to help you get to the next level. With that being said, let me go into business coach mode right now. I'm going to challenge you. In this episode with Diane, you're going to hear something, you're going to learn something, you're going to realize something. And on that, I want you to take action in the next 24 hours. And then I want you to pay attention to how that improves your business or your life. I hope you know this podcast is built to educate, inform, and inspire you. So let me get into your head and ask you an inspirational question. Are you happy being a contractor who runs a few crews? Or do you want to be a business person who just happens to run a construction company? By the end of today's episode, you'll know the answer. Let's get to it. Diane Shattuck, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. I haven't seen you since the AWFS when you and I met in the speaker's room.
Yes, I remember.
Free cookies and coffee.
And it was so great.
That's what it takes to get me in that room. Free cookies and coffee. Yeah.
Right.
Well, you were a speaker at the AWFS, which is how I met you.
Yes.
Today, and I have to tell you, Diane, until the second I met you, I didn't know you existed.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't know that finishing experts who'd actually finished lived in this world and were out on stage talking about finishing, which is something I would care about, but I thought nobody else did. So I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
So today our topic is how to hire the right finisher. But let me start with this crazy question. You ready?
I'm ready.
Diane Shattuck, who the heck are you? And how is it you come to be speaking to all these forward-facing cabinet makers all over the world?
Well, I have been blessed to work in this woodworking career all my entire life. And during that time, I have been in every different facet of the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Starting with being a finisher.
Oh.
Then I had my own finishing shop. Then I sold several different kinds of finishing lines through distribution, which then also helped me learn more about equipment and abrasives. After selling it, then I went and worked for a manufacturer.
Hmm.
So then I got to see all the manufacturing of the coating and how they do the testing and whatnot. That was exciting. Then I became the corporate trainer. So now I was training the
Right.
distribution people how to do it. Um, then I turned into a professional speaker. So I was speaking at, IWF and AWFS and
Yeah, that's where we met.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I used to write blogs, so I was a professional writer. I've been published in several magazines, interviewed by HGTV,
Yikes.
and I've done historical restorations. I mean, I've done all kinds of stuff. Currently, now I teach and I do some consulting.
Oh, and where do you teach?
So I teach at my own business, which is Professional Finishing
Ah,
Academy and Consulting, and I also teach at Florida Woodworking School. It's downtown Tampa, Florida,
yeah.
and that's a great school that I teach there a couple times a year.
Wow. And would you have thought this? So you said you started in finishing. Would you have thought this when you started in finishing at the age of 7, I take it?
Well, close. I was actually 16 when I started. The
Oh,
only
you
other job
were.
I've ever
Oh,
had is worked at Arby's for 3 months. It
oh,
was like, yeah, your best friend, you go and get your first job.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I
You
worked at
hang out.
Arby's. And then after that, I started in finishing because my father was a cabinet maker and he
Oh,
had
so you
his
were in
own
your dad's
business.
shop. You just like
Yes.
most families that are cabinet making.
Yep.
Yeah, helping dad after work and or after
Exactly.
school, I guess.
School. So I started when I was 16 and so here's 40 some years later. I'm loving it, still doing it, learning every day, loving to share. I,
Yeah,
the coatings just keep evolving and it's amazing. And so
yeah.
it's never boring and I just keep learning and teaching.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's different parts of the country where people finish on site, like in the
Yes.
shop. And then there's other parts of the country where they finish on premise, like at the install. And that always I it every area, and you know this, every area's got its own little touch on finishing. And of course,
Yeah.
humidity levels dictate sometimes the finishes. And yeah. But
Yeah.
today you're here. I pulled you out to ask you this big question. How do we hire the right finisher? It's all business owners here. We're having trouble hiring people anyway. We're having trouble finding people. But then that finisher position is it's like a hockey goalie.
Yeah.
It's a unique position. It has its own, I don't know, world. How do we hire and find that right finisher?
That's a great question. And it's very difficult to find the right finisher
Mm.
because they're a different breed. And most people in the woodworking industry love to build. And then they like the finishing part is like, ugh, that's what I don't like to do because, I'm not really good at it or whatnot. And that's because finishing is very complex. You have to be the weatherman, you have to be the detective, you have to be the artist, you have to be the robot.
You also have to be
There
the scientist because you've got to
the
mix to
scientist for
accurate.
mixing.
Yeah.
Yep. There's so many hats that you have to wear. And it's something that you need to do each step. So it's so critical to have like a
Mm.
storyboard and an SOP for everything. And nobody wants to do that. You like to just jump in and get at it. But you can do the exact same thing today and tomorrow and have different results because the humidity changed, the temperature changed, your mood changed. You sanded it yesterday and you didn't resand it today, so now the stain's going to take different. There's just so many variables that
Yeah.
that's why I love it because every day you have to be on top of your game and every day you have to be thinking about, ooh, how's this going to affect
do,
that and
do
the
you
other
know
thing.
that a bunch of people listening are like, I'm going to try and hire Diane to come and be my finisher? But that's not the point of today. The point of today is we've got to get, like, how do we get that consistency? Because what shows up for us as the owner is quality control.
Yeah,
When we put it in front of a customer and it's not the same because we painted that part of the kitchen yesterday and this part today, and it doesn't show up the same, or for the architectural mill workers, the tolerances are even tighter, things get crazy.
yeah. So to hire the right person is to find someone who's very organized,
Mm.
find someone who is very detail oriented, um, is open to change because coatings are changing every day.
Right.
Someone who is going to listen to, advice or suggestions and
Mm,
things like that, because like I say, it's constantly evolving, right? So one of the things that I put together was a finishing analysis quiz,
mm,
and what it is it's multiple choice. So now multiple choice will help you analyze his critical thinking because the answer's there. And there's
right.
typically two good answers, one right, two good ones, and then two stupid ones, right? And so they're picking from these answers. And the quiz has several different sections. Like there's a sanding section, stain, coatings, troubleshooting, equipment, application.
Mm.
So a bunch of different sections. And each section has about 15, 20 questions. Okay. And
Oh,
as you ask the question in each section, they get a little harder. So what happens is as this person is taking the quiz,
yeah.
you're going to be able to see exactly how much does he really know, because you're going to have people that come in and go, yeah, I've been finishing for 15 years. And
Right.
they may have been an applicator and not a finisher.
Ah,
And so the quiz kind of helps narrow down how much they know really.
yeah.
And so, you can hire him, but you're not paying him what he's saying, oh, I need $25 an hour, when he's really only worth 15 from his knowledge, right?
Right. So
So
like
he
any
sold
good
himself.
test, like any good
Yeah.
test. I mean, you and I are both in the business of adult education.
Yeah.
Any good test or quiz should move from the very general to the specific. So almost a triangle that gets. And so you've got a little filter. I call these filters. Like it's a simple system. Part of
Yeah.
the interview process for a finisher then is you say take this quiz. And are they doing it on paper or is it online? Like how do you put them through
It's
that?
on paper.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. So it's easy. It's not complex. They just
Nope.
get this paper quiz,
Yep.
give it to their finishing applicant. Hey, could you be
Yep.
able to use it if you want to take somebody in the shop and ask them to be a finisher? Would it be
Sure.
good for a total greenhorn? Do they still use the word greenhorn?
Yeah, you could say that.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, you could. And, depending on who I was working with, I would find out what they're using, what they're doing, so that you're not asking questions that don't pertain to their business, right? So
You
if
mean
somebody is,
water-based versus
yeah,
oh, okay.
conversion varnish or 2K
Right.
urethane, or they're using UV, so whatever kind of coating system that they're working with, then I would pull those questions because I have, I don't know, 85 to 100 different questions that I can pull and filter
Oh my
into.
gosh. Okay. That's a long
Well, I've
test.
been doing this a while.
Yeah.
And the thing is you learn every time you meet a new, shop owner, you hear his stories and his,
Right.
concerns and whatnot. And so you tailor it to what he
Mm.
needs, right? And so I just have a, a library of good questions to ask, and then I put them together and say, okay, here you go.
You and I have somebody that we know in common. I call him
Yes, we
William the Magnificent because he's got the greatest red fiery beard. You and I both know him in common.
yes,
So he's got a different shop than George on the other side of the country. You would customize the questions to William the Magnificent versus George?
yes.
Oh, okay. I thought it was just a standard. Here's the thing.
No, I mean, I have
Oh,
one that when I was working through distribution, it was the same sort of coatings that was in that neighborhood, right? But then
yeah,
as I started working with other companies across the country, it's like, okay, they have different needs. And like, from Florida to California to
right.
Vegas to Michigan, it's
No
all
humidity
different.
difference at all,
Right.
right?
So, the questions have to be tailored to that environment, that sort
Yeah.
of thing. So a lot
Okay.
of things are similar, but then they're different.
Yeah. Well, you know what people like are stories. Tell us a story about a shop, and obviously we're not going to share names, and William, we all know. So,
Right.
but tell us a story about a shop that went through some sort of learning process based on what you've done, or maybe a shop that had like a really serious issue and then had to learn something. Oh, you're nodding. Uh-oh.
Well, one of my favorites, a lot of people call me the storyboard queen.
The
So I
storyboard queen. Oh, I
yes,
love it. Yeah,
because
yeah.
I keep insisting that you have a storyboard, and they keep insisting that they don't need it. So if you don't
Now,
know what a storyboard is,
thank you. I was just going to
it's
ask.
okay. So it's a visual panel that shows every step that you took to get to the end.
I call that a
So
recipe book. Are we talking?
yeah, so
Oh, okay,
it's
good.
it's like your SOP, but a
Sure.
visual step panel. Okay.
Mm.
So this particular shop had a big job in downtown Tampa with his lawyer office, and there was 26 4x8 sheet panels. They were sequin matched. I mean,
Oh,
this was like had to
veneer,
be
like veneer
perfect,
layups
same
or
color. Hmm?
okay, veneer
Yeah,
layups. Yeah,
veneer layup.
yeah.
So it had to be consistent. And the owner calls me and says, I need to make sure that this is all going to be the same. I'm like, yep, no problem. We can do this. So I go and I work with this finisher and we make the storyboard. Okay, this is the color. We mix the color and we go through the whole process, make the storyboard and say, now, if you follow this, everything's going to be the same. All right. So I leave. Well, the next day he does the job, right? And a couple days later they install it. Well, the owner calls me and he is furious because there's 26 panels, but none of them match.
Oh,
And he is like furious, right?
yeah. I'd be furious.
Yeah, so I'm like, well, what happened? Because I don't know, but you better get down here because it's not acceptable. And he had to remove them all and bring them back to the shop.
Mm.
So he does that. I go and see the finisher and I said, I don't understand. Did you follow the storyboard? And he looks at me and he says, I don't need no stinking storyboard. He says, I've been finishing 15 years. I know how to put on finish. And I'm like, well, obviously we needed the storyboard because we don't have consistency here. So I said, it's okay. We can fix this. So he strips them.
Yeah,
Well, two of them get damaged in the stripping. So now they have to get two more, which is
yeah,
going to be a problem because it was sequin match, right?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
But in the meantime, I make a new storyboard because we can't use the original because now we have a 90-year-old woman that has to look 16, right? Because it was brand new for, but now it's been stripped. So it's 90 needing to look
Redressed up as a
16.
nine. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
it's like, okay, well, now we can only make her like maybe a hot 65, but it ain't going to be 60. So we make a new storyboard.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we make the new storyboard and I tell him, and he goes, I got it. So he follows it. Great. That's the whole day doing those 24. Well, when the next two come in, he's got this now, right? So he's done this whole thing. So he doesn't need the storyboard. So he just finishes them like he did the other 24. What do you think happened? Those
No.
other two don't match because this is the 16-year-old and not the
Oh, right, 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 right,
right.
right.
So he's using a totally different thing. They get installed. Now those two panels don't match the others, but now they're not going to take them back out again. So we have to finish them on
On
site. So
site. Yeah,
so
yeah.
we have to make those look like the other 24. So then I go back to the shop
That's
out there.
exponent. That's 10 times. No, that's 1,000 times harder because
Exactly.
your control environment's gone.
So we have to make a new storyboard because now we have to take what's existing and bring it to the other. So we do that and I say, you're good. He's good. Has to do it on the weekend when no one's in the office. Saturday morning, I get a phone call from the finisher and he's almost in tears. He's on the job site. He redid everything. When he peeled off the paper and the masking from everything, it doesn't match. And I'm like, I
Uh,
don't understand, Joe. Why doesn't it match, hon?
yeah.
But did you use a storyboard? And then it's quiet.
Oh, no.
And he says, well, I was packing up for the day and I forgot it, but I didn't figure I needed it because, I knew what I was going to be doing.
How many times can you apply the chemicals to strip before that wood stops taking? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Because when you look at wood under a microscope, it's like a bunch of straws, right?
Yeah, it's a
And
porous
they're live
surface, right? It's
fibers that are
yeah.
expanding and contract. So every time if this is the straw and I put the stain in there,
Mhm.
so it's penetrating in here, and then I try to strip it out or I sand it. Basically, when you're sanding, you're just cutting that straw. You're not getting it out. You're just cutting
Right,
it.
right, right, right.
So every time you're sanding it, you're just cutting it, cutting it, cutting it. Well, pretty soon you're
It's
not going
full.
to have much
Yeah. And
left.
on a veneer, you've only got so much space anyway.
Exactly. And it's not going to take the same because those fibers have already been, introduced to
Absorbing.
that.
Yeah.
So the absorptions, everything, it all changes. So yeah, so that's my storyboard story because it was like 4 times. Really, dude? So when
I
he
need to know,
finally did it
did we
with the
ever get it?
storyboard,
Did we ever get
huh?
it right? Did we ever get it right?
Eventually, yes, he got it. He got it right. He also lost his job because the owner at that point was like just had enough. It was like
Yeah.
just if he would have just followed the storyboard at the beginning, everything would have been great. But that's what I mean by an applicator to a finisher, because an applicator just figures, well, if I put it on one more time,
Mm.
Well, if I do it one more time like this, well, if I,
Let's really
and
hide it behind a couple of coats.
yeah. And so you keep applying, or you just keep thinking that if I do the same thing enough times, eventually it'll come right. And that's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the
Yeah.
same thing over and over, expecting a
Yeah.
different result.
I think
So,
what I've learned from you is I'm going to add being a finisher in an architectural mill workshop to the long list of jobs I'll never do. That's what
it's,
I learned.
you know, finishers I love
It's
finishing
an
because it's
art. No, it's
exciting.
absolutely an art, isn't it? Actually,
It,
on that topic, how many times have you heard this? Because I hear this when the doors are closed and I'm speaking to the owner out of frustration, the frustration in their voice. I can't get that guy or gal. So there's a lot of women in finishing because of the high detail oriented, that just they have that right mindset. I
yes,
can't get them to wear their beep beep mask.
yeah.
And the owner's begging them to wear their PPE. And they're have you ever heard the same, or is it just me?
Oh yeah. And I got
Oh,
a story there too. Oh yeah.
we got
Um,
time for a story, Diane. Story time with Diane. I love it. What is it?
well, so your PPE is very important. And this one, a lot of times I hear it from the guys because they're young. And I'm young and that won't bother me as, you only have to do that when you're old.
Mm,
The story that I have is what happened to me. I was 22, 23, so that's young. Okay. And I was working for my father at the time,
mm,
and it was a very hot, humid day. And I was trying to spray this cabinet, but it kept turning white. It was blushing. And
ah,
this is back. So this was
what?
back when nitrocellulose lacquer was the lacquer to spray. So that
Yeah,
just aged me quite a bit.
that
Okay.
sounds like a Dow Petrochemical boardroom invention right there.
So, it's very old technology, but anyway, it blushes very easily. So we had to turn off. I couldn't use my exhaust fan because it would suck in the outside air,
Ah,
and then everything would blush on me. And I was putting more retarder in, more retarder in. Anyway, wearing my respirator, I would spray, and then I'd run outside and I'd get some fresh air, and I'd come back in, and then I'd spray and I'd run outside. Well, one time I don't come back in,
you didn't come back into the shop or back into the booth?
back into the shop. I had gone out to get some fresh air and
Oh,
passed out.
oh gosh.
And the
Well,
the
thank God
guys
you
in the
passed out
shop,
there. I'm sure this isn't good, but thank God it was out there.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But it was outside, and the
Mm,
guys in the shop think must be nice. Boss's daughter's taking a nap.
right.
So they, left me there. And like all day goes by. And at about five
Oh, a
o'clock,
full day. You were out
the full
there
day. Yeah,
zonked for a
I'm
day.
passed out. I am
Oh
passed
my
out.
gosh.
So the guy, the foreman comes out and he kicks me and goes, "Hey, get up. It's the end of the day." And like when I
Oh,
wake up,
Diane.
my entire body is like tingling. Like when your leg falls asleep or your arm falls asleep,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
my entire body was like that. And I couldn't stand up. I'm like, just, whoa, what happened? Well, even though I'm wearing a respirator, your skin is your largest organ. And so
Hmm.
I was still absorbing all that chemical with no proper ventilation, none of that stuff. And so it was
Crazy.
going into my skin and it poisoned me to where I passed out. And it was like, it took me 2 weeks before I could walk 10
Whoa.
feet without bouncing off the wall. I couldn't walk
And you're 23 at the time. I mean, at this
straight.
point,
And
our
six
bodies are
months
very
before I could go
resilient.
back into the shop and work a couple hours.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was so, when I see the people without wearing the respirator, I tell them the story and beg them, please wear the respirator.
There's an
It's
owner listening to this podcast because he and I met through this podcast. He now works with us one on one. He actually works with Coach Lee. He told us the same story. He
really,
well, he'd said, yeah, let's get started with coaching. And then he went quiet. We just didn't hear from him. And I thought, oh, okay, he's busy or he's in a big job or something. So you just leave it, right? And then a little while later, I pinged him, like, how are things? And he's like, Dom, I've been so sick. I'm like, oh, well, I'm sorry to hear it. What happened? Well, he gets caught, his liver. I don't know if it was the same with you, but his liver can't process through his skin. He absorbs the chemicals, even though he wears his PPE, he said to me. But he absorbs it through his skin and then his liver can't process. So it just builds up and builds up. And then his body shut down and he was really sick. And,
yeah,
let's put ourselves in the shoes of that person. They're, especially as the owner, they've got to provide for their family. It's not like they can go get another job doing something else. They've got a company to run. So everything is on the line.
yeah.
Everything.
And there's nothing you can do, like I went to the doctor, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And there was nothing he could do for me because you had to let your body, the
Just
blood
process it.
system, just process and filter it itself. There was no medication he could give me. I had to let nature do its course. And so
Ah,
that's why I say it took a long time. I was very sensitive to being near the booth. So yeah, proper PPE is critical. You need to do that.
wow.
And you don't want to get anything splashed in your eyes. I've had plenty of chemicals over the years, splashed in my eyes. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I had a really bad uh, incident with that because, I'm cleaning
Mm,
some equipment and got the parts soaking in aircraft stripper. And when I hit the table with the wrench, trying to get something loose, it popped it off the table and it splashed in both my eyes. I wasn't wearing safety glasses because I'm working on a tool. I didn't think anything of it, right?
right, right, right.
Oh my God, I was, that burned and ran to the sink to flush my eyes with water. And that's the key thing that they have to remember too. If you get any chemicals in your eyes,
Right.
flush your eyes. If you don't have an eye wash station, at least with water for 15 minutes before you seek emergency.
15 minutes.
15 minutes, because I did that for 15 minutes and they kept wanting to take me to the emergency. And I'm like, nope, I got to flush for 15 minutes. And when I got there, the emergency doctor said, had I not done that, I would have lost my sight. He put these little suction cups on my eyes, and then it was like hooked up to
I've
an IV. And
I've
they're like,
had that. I've had that because I was doing a reno in a restaurant and I was using contact cement to apply some wall surface finish. And it
uh-huh.
was an unventilated room. And I left there and my eyes were all gummy. And then by the time I drove home, both of my eyes wouldn't open. And it was, like sleep in your eyes, but as
Yeah,
if sleep in my eyes was what my body was ready to produce. And so I ended up going to the hospital and they use those little suction things on your eye. You're like,
yeah,
what is that? Truthfully, after they took them off is when I could see them. Because before I just couldn't see. My eyes were gummed shut.
yep.
It's a great visual for a podcast. I'm sorry, folks.
And when they're doing that on your eyes too, that in my mind, that's what like waterboarding would be. It was terrible.
Yeah.
That in
Yeah.
your
It's
eyes, it was,
you can't get away
oh,
from it, but you need it. You
oh
have to
yeah,
hold still.
yeah,
Like it was not fun.
yeah. Not fun, but you want to see, so you put
Yeah.
up with it. But yeah,
Now, I think one of the problems with our episode is that there's so much to talk to you about because just in that 2 or 3 minutes before we hit record, you said something to me that was incredibly interesting. It was a way you look at a shop that's different than a lot of people do. And I really liked your analogy. Do you remember the one we're talking about, the heartbeat?
oh yeah.
Can we switch
So
gears a little bit? I know this isn't about hiring the perfect finisher. We'll get to that maybe at the end again, but can you give us a few minutes on your thought about the heartbeat of a shop?
yeah, so one of the very first things that I like to do when I meet the shop owner and we start talking about finishing is I need to see your compressor. Because your compressor is the heart of your
Mm,
business. Everything runs off of the compressor, right?
mm,
And I want to see how your airlines are distributed through your shop too, because if you think of your compressor like your heart,
uh-huh.
right? The airlines are like all the veins that go through your body.
This is a really good analogy, This is really
But
good.
your heart, okay, so I tell them the compressor, think of how big the compressor needs to be as the motor on the compressor is how much money you make. And the tank size is
Mhm.
your savings account. And then think of every tool you run off of that compressor
Uh-huh.
is a bill you need to pay. So you need to be making enough money to pay those bills without going into your savings account. So what I'll get is people saying, "Oh yeah, I got a big compressor. It's an 80-gallon tank, 5 horsepower." Hmm. Rule of thumb is 4 CFM per horse.
Okay.
Okay. And if a sander takes, and so in finishing world, I'm concerned with HVLP guns and DA sanders, and they're air
Constant.
hogs.
Yeah,
They're air
constantly
hogs.
just
So to run an HVLP gun, you need somewhere between, because there's several different models, but you need somewhere between 10 and 16
mm,
SCFM to run that. That's a lot, considering a nail gun is one, right? So when you look at that. If it's 16 and I have a 5 horsepower compressor,
Hmm.
so 5 times 4 is 20 CFM that I'm making. All right. Just running that one spray gun is all I can do
In
at
the
one
shop,
time.
the whole shop's going to,
I'm paying that one bill. That's it.
yeah. Wow.
Because
It's a good
as
way to
soon
look
as
at it.
somebody else turns on an air sander, now neither get what they need. And so both processes fail. So now I have swirls in my sanding, my finishing, I don't have a fan pattern and my color starts changing because I'm spraying and
Mm.
so a lot of things vary, right? So I want to see the compressor and then I
Mhm.
want to see how the airlines are because are you an octopus or are you connected? So if you have your airlines going from your compressor and they go out like an octopus legs, just to all these different ends, but they're not connected, then it becomes a tug of war for the air when someone at one end turns it on and someone
Ah.
at the other end turns it on. But if your airline is looped and it comes back to itself,
Mhm.
then we have an even steady, kind of like electricity, a circuit, right?
Right. Right.
And so now you actually kind of gain balance and a little more CFM by having that loop. And so you kind of
A-
helped your
Art meets
compressor.
engineering, Diane. It sounds like a little bit of art, a little bit of engineering,
Yeah.
right? And then you mentioned before PVC pipes versus,
Oh my gosh.
well, yeah.
Yeah.
For
So
people who aren't
PVC.
watching this, if you're listening as a podcast, you can't see the YouTube video, but it's on YouTube as well. You have to see Diane's face change when I ask that question.
Well, because PVC pipe is designed for water pressure. Like you'll see, oh, 400 PSI. So they'll think PSI, oh, okay, that's like the air pressure. Water pressure and air pressure are two different things. And PVC, depending on where you are in the country, like let's say you're in Michigan,
Mm.
you have temperature change that gets really cold and then really hot, and so that PVC will get very brittle.
Mm.
And you'll see when it's piped through the shop how it's like drooping a little bit,
Right.
And
Yeah.
so there's an area where water's going to get trapped. And so, in the morning you turn on your air system and all of a sudden the parts in the morning seem to have, problems in them because water just went whoosh from where it was resting in there.
Oh.
But what's really scary about the PVC is that it's not stable. So because it can get brittle, it can explode. And I walked into a shop one time
Mm.
and there was a PVC pipe that went down the side of his wall. And it was like 2 inch round, right?
Okay.
But it was shattered. It looked like this daggered thing. And is that connected to his airline? So I'm like, I hadn't met the owner yet. I just walked in the shop, but my eyes were quickly traveling, like, where's this
Right.
line go? And
Yeah.
sure enough, it was the air thing. And so when he came out, I asked him, I said, hey, was that your airline? He goes, oh, I was so lucky. He goes, he was standing at his table saw, which was right in front of that. And he was cutting, and the phone rang. So he left to go answer the phone. And while he was on the phone, he heard this bam.
Bam.
And it was when the airline exploded and that PVC, like a dagger, went shooting through and stuck in the garage door
Oh, no
that would have
way.
been right behind where he was standing. And he was like, oh, 30 seconds later or 2 minutes, I would have
What's your
been dead.
favorite? I'll call it conduit so that I don't give away the answer. What's your favorite instead of PVC? What's your ideal?
So the aluminum piping that you get like from Prevost or something like
Yeah.
that, that's good because you don't have that static and moisture. I mean,
Right.
black pipe you could get rusting, copper's okay, but you get sweating.
Yeah.
He's
And
not
it's copper.
not safe.
And it's copper. So let's.
So yeah, so the but your airlines should and don't use hoses either because they'll get I mean you can for your short distance, right? But don't use that to drape your whole shop. Don't use
Yeah.
hoses.
What kind of performance difference do you see in the finishing booth when you optimize your compressor and compressor distribution system? What kind of quality change does an owner see at the finishing head?
Wow. So you'll see consistency because think about it. If you have something running and then the compressor has to kick on, you have that little bit, right?
Yeah.
So if we have that steady where there's no interruption, that's beautiful. Your fan pattern's going to be great, great.
Yeah.
Your
Your
atomization is
nozzle
going to
doesn't
be
come up
great.
as quick because yeah.
Yeah. So that's huge. Another thing about compressors that I see, and this might be a nice tidbit for the guys out there, is don't put your dryer like right on the compressor because your compressor gets like 400 degrees while it's operating, right? And you need to have that first desiccant or filter, coalescent filter, at least 25, 30 feet away
Mm,
before you have that first drop. Because when you put it right outside of the compressor,
mm.
it's not going to catch any moisture there because hot air holds the moisture. So at 400 degrees, nothing is trapping in there. It's when it travels about 30 feet down and it starts to cool, that's where you're going to be able to take the water off. And so
Yeah. All I can
you
think
need
of
to
right
do,
now is a moonshine still. That everything the analogy of what's that show on TV where it's a still. You just created a
yeah.
still, right? Yeah. Yeah. So those
So
those are important considerations for people. And running a shop has its own, the woodshop is that's why this show's about the business of the woodshop business. There's so many things to take into account. But that quality control sounds like, oh yeah, it'd be nice if we had better quality control and blame my guys and all that stuff. But the impact is that customer isn't going to call you back. That builder is not going to want you back because it's just one more thing that we can solve
right,
before it continues to be a problem that lends itself to higher operating costs, higher cost of goods sold. Go backs are so, I mean, they just kill us. They kill our profitability. And all of that can be solved in the shop if you've got, a tight system for
right,
finishing.
right. So that's one of the things that I like to do is just kind of walk around and be the eyes because when you set something someplace and it's been there 3 days, that's normal now. You don't see it anymore. Even when you think, oh, I got to fix that. And so you leave it out so that it reminds you. You don't see it after 3 days. It becomes
Oh,
normal.
I didn't know what you meant there. Yeah, it fades into your background.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So when I can come in and just kind of be the new eyes that sees something that you probably knew about, but and you were gonna do,
I
but you
forgot.
forgot because now it's normal, I can help you remind you about that.
Yeah.
Um, and just kind of see how everything works. But when you start talking about the problems that you have, in finishing, basically three things will always finishing problems boil down to three things.
Mhm.
It's going to be a sanding issue, a time issue, or solvents.
So I'm
So
writing
you're
this
going to
down:
have,
sanding, timing, or solvents.
yeah,
Right?
so I call it SOS. And I know the O doesn't mean anything, but to me it's a clock. So sanding, time,
Yeah.
solvents. So SOS, I've got some problems. I need to fix something. And when you look at the problem and then you start dissecting what it is, it'll always kind of funnel down to one of those or a combination of those.
Mm,
And so it's important to look at the sanding, look at how your airlines are, your fittings. Are you giving it enough air?
mm.
Because that sander is an air hog. And so if you have a little coily hose hanging from the ceiling because it's convenient and it's lightweight, but you're hooking up your sander to it, that 1/4 inch little coily hose is not giving enough volume of air. It could give it the PSI, but it's not giving it the volume.
Right.
So now this tool is trying to suck the volume that it's not getting. So it's like me giving you a shake and a coffee straw and say, enjoy the shake
Good
with the
luck.
coffee straw.
Yeah. The first
You're
two, the first 2 seconds out of the drive-through at McDonald's. I can't get this thing.
but you're sucking really hard and you're not getting anything through
Yeah.
it because it's small, right? But if I give you the right straw, you're enjoying that shake. So with sanding, you want a hose to be um, 5/16 or 3/8 and no longer than 15 or 25 feet. Because if you have 100-foot hose, but it's 3/8, and you go, well, I got the right size hose now. Yeah, but you have it 100 feet. Now the way that it's traveling, now I give you that shake, the right straw, but I move it across the room and say, okay, Dom, go ahead
Oh,
and
yeah.
enjoy
I
that.
mean, it's like having a snorkel that's too thin trying to
Yeah.
breathe from the bottom of the ocean. Yeah.
So you
So when
just kind
you,
of, bring things into where it needs to be for optimum use, right?
yeah,
And then you'll notice these little things start changing. But, sanding has a lot of swirls and stuff like that that can be caused from not having the right connections. And so just making some quick little connections, boom,
these
you're
quality issues. You know, finding quality issues is an important part of making sure we stay profitable in a business. Just because you know, I hope nobody makes a t-shirt that says this, but have you ever heard the saying, we do it right because we do it twice?
No.
Okay. Let's not make people start to say that. But all of those, like the quality issues of swirls or leaving an onion skin after CNC usage, or, all of those things, it just means extra work that didn't need to happen. And one of the places I find one of the places that I find it's easiest to help owners recognize that is through their KPIs, just having a dashboard where they can track how things look over time. Because like you said, after something's in front of you for a while, you stop seeing it.
Yep.
I think my wife has that problem with me. I told you to take that downstairs. What thing? It's just been sitting there, right? I didn't see it. I might have saw it the first time, but not the third, right?
Right.
But you have to have a way to track these things. And dashboards, I know to some people it sounds boring. To other people, they understand that it's one of the ways that you get back in control of your business. My favorite things to do are to track maintenance, either proactive or reactive maintenance. Mm-hmm. So if for instance, the proactive maintenance is we need to drain our compressor. How many times have people forgotten to drain the compressor? And of course, that leads to different, performance, right? Or the forklift has to be maintained. So that's one line in the dashboard. The other one is the reactive maintenance, like stuff that broke or needed to be maintained that we hadn't anticipated. Because that's good. That should trigger with me. If the head on the CNC needed to be fixed this week, you're like, okay, somebody needs to write that down. Then it happens again next week. Then it happens again next week. And in your mind, you're just like, oh, it always happens. We just have to fix it. But when you look at your dashboard, you're like, this thing's been sending us flashing signals for 6 weeks. Something's up. Right. And you can find that, I suppose, in any department.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you have to pay attention to it.
Yeah. And you would catch the things if you had the storyboard, because when you start doing things the same way but it's not matching up your storyboard, then you're catching it before it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
So
I think I already said this, but you're just causing yourself problems. You're going to be a guest on the show again.
Oh, well, thank you.
So far we've got storyboard, we've got water-based versus ... Probably some other. Actually, let me make this request of anybody listening. If you've got questions on finishing, leave it in the comments somewhere or shoot me a side note. Everybody here knows how to get in touch with me. And actually, while we say that, Diane, if somebody wants to find you in this wide world, how the heck do we find you? Because I ran into you randomly when I was looking for cookies and coffee.
Thank you. Well, you can certainly email me. And so that would be at Diane Shattuck at msn.com.
That sounds pretty straightforward. But how do you spell Shattuck?
Shattuck. And Diane is with one N. So
okay.
DianeShattuck at msn.com.
Perfect.
And then my phone number would be 813-395-4923. And just text me and let me know that you have a question. I don't pick up the phone if I don't recognize the number, right? So just text me and say, hey, heard you on the show, or went to your class, or went to your seminar. As long as you let me know that you're talking about something like that, well, I'm right on it.
Oh, yeah. So for 400 episodes, I've been putting my personal cell phone number out on podcasts. And I've had to stop because I just get the craziest calls at the most interesting times of day and night from the most random countries, I'll say. I mean, here you've done it once on this podcast, you should be fine. But yeah, I've learned I have to stop doing that. It is, but you know what? It's the easiest way. There's no friction. It's like, you want to reach Diane, just text her here. You want to reach Dom, just text me there. It's nice, but it comes at a cost sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, from years of working in this industry and helping others, right?
Mm.
A 30-second phone call could save you $30,000 in rework if you're in the middle of a panic. You know what I mean? Like something's happening and you're like, oh my God, what's going on?
What do we fix?
And it could be something real simple that I might be able to help you right away. I have no problem doing that. I want to help people. When I first started finishing, my father wanted me to learn from this gentleman who was, this artist from Finland, or no. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. But he was an artist.
A European artist. It's always
Yes.
Europe, Diane.
But he didn't speak real good English, right?
Yeah.
And his name was Chris Peters. And he wanted to, he was an artist and he wanted to do his stuff, but he didn't want to share because, back in that day, it
Secret
was like,
sauce. Somebody might steal it from me.
that's right. Everything's
Yeah.
got to be a secret. And it was frustrating for me because I just wanted to learn and there was no way I was going to be as good as this guy. He was
Yeah.
amazing, right? And so that's when I decided that, you know what, anything that I know, I'm sharing because that's ridiculous. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. This is silly.
Oh my God.
So
You sound like
yeah,
me. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We've already figured out the shape. Let's
that's
negotiate the
right.
color, maybe the size, but the wheel's the wheel.
And you know what? Everybody has wonderful ideas, and you might not have thought of that. And it's like, wow. And then when they tell you their idea, then you think, oh, how could this work? And you come together and you get another idea. Nothing was wrong with the typewriter, right? But look at what the computer did. So when
What?
people say, well, it
Yeah.
ain't broke, I'm not fixing it, I think, well, nothing was wrong with the typewriter, but the computer totally changed the world.
Yeah.
But you still type on the same kind of keys and all that, so come on, let's share, let's grow, let's learn. And finishing is like that. It keeps changing. So um to say that you know it all, you
Mm.
never will. I'm the first one to say, hey, I don't know. I'll say I don't know nothing about finishing
Yeah.
because really what you know is like this much of what we really can know, and you
Do you
don't know
know,
what you don't know.
it's interesting that you say that because, one of the things that I do is I've got other coaches as well. Lee, a lot of people already coach with Lee. And one of the things that I teach our coaches is that we have to have enough ego to set our ego aside and be totally confident saying, I don't know the answer to that question. Because if I don't, as a business coach or as a leader in a company, then I'm assuming I have all the answers and I will never grow. I'll never allow my team to grow. We'll never get better systems. So it's okay to say, I know. You can only say that when you've got so much confidence
Yeah.
that it no longer matters. And that's why when we give information away, which I love doing, and I'm so happy that you do it as well, it just comes through. I don't know if you remember this inside story, folks. Here comes an inside story. When I met Diane, my wife and I were both at the conference together. We walked up to the speaker's room to do our registration package. There was a third gentleman in the room. Don't mention any names. I spoke to him for less than a minute and he did not get invited to be on our show because of everything you and I are talking about right now. And I picked that up in like 10 seconds of our conversation. The other 50 seconds I was trying to leave.
Yeah.
Right. But you could tell from people whether they are scarcity minded or abundance minded, which I think also goes to what did you call the thing you offered people, the finishers analysis? What's that called?
Yes, it's a finisher analysis quiz.
Yeah. So it's the same as that. Like there's a process. Share the process, help people. And guess what? Or this is something I learned from a lady many years ago, one of my sort of unofficial mentors. She says, Dom, you got to throw enough value at the world that you're happy with the overspray. But
right.
Where does the responsibility then lie? On people like you and I. We've got to give 1,000 times value so we get 10 times value back.
Yeah.
Right. Anyways, we're having a love fest right now. Maybe we should wrap up the episode. I will, however, restate one more time, folks, if there's something you want to ask Diane or have me ask her to be a guest on, somehow find a way to leave comments with me, or if you're talking to Diane, let her know. Let's say a mutual, hey, thank you to William the Magnificent, because I know he knows both of us. But yeah, I'm looking forward to having you back on the show again, Diane.
Thank you.
All right.
This was awesome.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye. Well, well, well. What did you learn from Diane today? What can you put in place? What does your shop need? What does your shop need to do different? What systems can you put in place? I want you to think about that. And I want you to take action like I reminded you at the beginning of the show. Hey, let me break this into 3 equal parts, this segment of the show into 3 equal parts. I'm going to start off with a dad joke. Why? I want you to think differently. I want you to open your mind. And today I've got a joke that really lines up with Diane's topic. Second, I'm going to ask you a quick favor, and I'm actually going to give you some feedback because I've asked this favor before. And number 3, we're going to identify a common problem for our industry, and we're going to take a step towards solving that today. Okay. I'm going to start off with a quick dad joke. Now, why dad jokes? Why bad jokes? Why dad jokes poorly delivered? Again, I want to open your mind. We talked today about hire the right finisher, and here's the joke that's really going to lock that down. The joke is called The Preacher and the Painters. A local preacher noticed that his church was starting to look pretty rough, and it could use a new coat of paint. Of course, he did a fundraiser. It came in a little bit under budget, but it would be enough to find a contractor. He got bids from several local painters, and he selected a two-man crew, which had given him the best price. As promised, the crew showed up on time and ready to work. They set up their scaffolding. They set up their tools. They set up their equipment. Everything was looking great. Now, the preacher checked in on them throughout the day, and he could see that they started by painting the front of the church. It looked great. There was a nice, thick, luscious coat of paint. Well, they immediately moved their equipment to the right side of the building, but when they checked their supplies, they saw that they still had a lot of painting to do versus how much they had budgeted for the remaining paint. So they added a bunch of paint thinner. Finishing up the right side, they then moved to the back of the church. And once again, looking at how much paint they had budgeted, they added even more thinner to the paint again. Now, once they finished the back of the church, they moved to the left side. Again, looking at how much paint they had, they realized they weren't going to have enough to finish that side and still make money on the job. So they added even more thinner to the paint. The contractor called the preacher to let him know the job was done. So the preacher walked over from the rectory for a tour. He examined the front of the church. Looks good, he said. He then moved to the right side. It looked a little less good. Then he moved to the back, started shaking his head. Then he moved to the left side of the building. It was at this point that the preacher looked at the contractor and he said, "Repaint, you thinners, repaint and thin no more." Diane, I got that joke just for you. Hey, folks, I want to ask you I want to thank you. In the last week, we've had 3 more people leave reviews. So thank you for doing that. You know, reviews are important. Again, it sounds like it's important for me, but it's not. It is so other people know that this is a trusted place to get good information. It takes work to find a Diane Shattuck or to get Mike McAllowitz or Paul Akers on here. And I appreciate you listening and leaving those reviews. Let other people know that those are great guests for the show. We've also had 16 people join the Facebook group. And I'm going to read from my phone because we just got a new Trustpilot review and I want you to hear it. I started listening to the Cabinet Maker Profit Systems podcast a few years ago. After a few years of listening to Dom and taking in all his wisdom, I decided it was time to move to the next level and joined as a client just 2 months back. Lee, so he's with Coach Lee. Lee is helping us master the art of job tracking and set up end of job reports to tackle our project costs head on. Now, we feel like we're starting to navigate the business highway like pros, avoiding costly detours. If you're looking for a business Sherpa, Lee is your guide to success. Can't wait to see how much more there is to discover and improve on. And he left 5 stars. I want to say thanks, guys. I really do, because it's awkward to ask for reviews. I mean, we're doing this because we want to give back, but those reviews really help other people find the show. And then hearing a wonderful review like this is great. For those of you who don't know, I've added a coach to my team. It's Coach Lee Miller. He's fantastic, as you can hear by the review. Anyways, I want to thank you guys. We've also had more new listeners in the last 3 months by a long shot. So the message is getting out there. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, listen, let's move to the business problem that we need to simplify and solve. And the business problem is that as owners, we get pulled in a million directions. This actually just happened to me the other day. At the time of recording, we're approaching the end of the quarter, right? So the year is broken up into quarters, and we reset our goals every quarter, as you would expect, because we follow the EOS system in my business, just as I encourage you to do in yours. My assistant, Helen, many of you have met her or heard of her or seen her on Contractor Strategy Group. Her and I were talking about the priorities that we had for the quarter. And what I realized is that I had taken my eye off the ball on tracking our numbers. And now you guys should all be shaking your head and wagging your finger at Mr. Rubino, because that's what I talk about all the time. But we've got all these side projects, Helen said to me. We've got side projects pulling us here and pulling us there. We're editing the book. The book is called Construction Millionaire Secrets. We're adding 2 chapters to it, so it's going to get republished. We have some work to do on the podcasts. Recently, our websites got hacked, so we got pulled into a million directions there. Does this not sound like the same big things that happen in your life as a business owner? You have great intentions. You know exactly what you need to do, but you get pulled away from the focus because so many things are diluting your time. It happens to me and it happens to you. I had to follow my own advice. And actually, I share all of those lessons learned in a masterclass that I run every once in a while. It's called the Time, Team, and Money Secrets Masterclass. If you want to join us on that masterclass, it's an hour, but we only run it when the waitlist gets big enough that we'll have enough people to do it, because obviously it's a big investment of time for myself, but also for people to join in. You don't want to have it with 2 people on the call. If you want to be on the masterclass, get on the waitlist first. Again, once the waitlist gets big enough, then we'll send out an email and invite everybody. We'll figure out the time and the date and stuff. Anyways, just send me a text message that says masterclass waitlist. That's the keyword. That's pretty simple. And you guys know my cell phone number. Say it with me, 315-903-7853. And just text me the word masterclass waitlist. And once again, in case you're driving or you need to hear it again, 315-903-7853, and just use those keywords there. All right, I think we'll wrap it up here. But again, I want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to myself and Diane, for thinking about the growth of your business and trying to get new perspective. I want to remind you that even 10 years ago, listening to a podcast or watching somebody like Diane as an expert on YouTube wasn't even possible. The only option you would have had was to go to a conference once a year in some other city, which would have meant you had to pay for flight, pay for hotel, leave your shop, shut down the shop, go over there, listen to the conference, take the learning track that had Diane in it, listen to Diane, then fly back home and undo that whole process and hope to put something in place. We live in a modern world where you can just casually check in to an expert like Diane and myself, hear what other people are doing to improve their business, and almost immediately choose to take a step forward in your business by applying what you've learned. Pretty cool. On top of all of that, what's missing is the chance for you and I to have a glass of wine across the table from each other and just talk like humans. I miss that. I really do. And I hope one day we get a chance to do that. Until then, thank you so much for checking in. We'll see you on the next episode.